Yes.
Sure. I mean, because they're the ones that manipulate everything. I mean, go back, read Charlotte Isherbeat's book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. I mean, see where we were.
Right. Oh, I know. I've read newspapers out of the 1800s, and I'm flabbergasted. And I continually on eBay, whenever I've got a couple of dollars, go and shop for books that are pre-1900, and you get to spend a couple of dollars, and you get some of these things that put any of our current textbooks to shame.
Absolutely. Charlotte had, one time she was on, and she brought a test, an 8th grade test from before the 1900s, 1880, 1890, for 8th grade. Clif,
calculus and trigonometry. And
yes, I could not answer the question. I think maybe I got 1 or 2 right. I mean,
scary, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, where could we be if the egomaniacs haven't destroyed everything? I mean, why? Well,
let's go back to our little gray bastarditos there.
Well, if that's...
Because we've got to assume certain things. Buckminster Fuller, Mark Twain, any number of very good thinkers came to the idea that there was an invisible hand behind things. And within certain contexts, many of them doubted that it was entirely due to the strength and resources of the self-styled elite. And I would agree with it. Now, we also have in our data, going to this very same point, stuff showing up saying that NASA is going to get into a world of hurt here sometime in September relative to the public opinion and NASA. Now, we know that the federal government issues that we're seeing now, we could have misinterpreted it, but I'm still holding out that NASA itself is going to screw up and bring themselves up to a point where there is a big public brouhaha about something they know.
Do you think it will involve Mars?
It may well, but at this point it's hard to say, because bear in mind we've got that same filtering issue. Everybody who speculates on this issue in discussions on the Internet, we have to filter out all that conscious stuff and go for the more underlying emotions, which we then translate back to the descriptors. So our aggregation is necessarily more vague than the first-rate descriptions that one might get from a whistleblower, for instance.
Right. Here's an interesting point, Cliff. We just got an email from Barry Kay, and he says an editorial in today's Financial Times, which is the British newspaper, points out a 2001 report, so it's almost 5 years ago, and this is before 9/11, by FEMA, suggested the 3 worst-case events include a terrorist attack in New York, a hurricane flooding New Orleans, and finally an earthquake in San Francisco.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Hello, FEMA.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
I wish I had a copy of the whole Financial Times, but I think it would probably be fairly easy to get a hold of.
And even so, the report will probably tell you nothing that we're not aware of, and again, it'll probably be exactly spot on. And we undoubtedly will have that quake. I'm pretty sure we're running into another one of those energy periods, because we're having so many GRBs pop in. We saw one of these prior to the Sumatra quake, where over the course of 45 or 50 days, we gradually built up. We had these sort of waves of GRBs coming in and strange solar activity. Again, we're at that stage. It's an energy system. It's Buckminster Fuller called it total energy accounting.
Yep.
He said, "Don't tell me how many miles per gallon your car gets. Tell me how many barrels of oil it takes to manufacture the car before we then start talking about its miles per gallon."
What made him so smart?
Traumatic life experience and the death of his daughter in a horrific way that cast a level of guilt on him that so affected him that for 85 years later on his deathbed, the only thing he could think of was that hurt he had done to her.
Is that right?
And he spent 2 years in a super deep funk, evolved several techniques for meditation on his own, and reached a certain point of wisdom or enlightenment.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
Anyway, his total energy accounting can be applied to the planet, which he did. And he also came up with the most efficient way of having a national or a global electrical grid in such a way that it would be redundant and no one would ever have to have blackouts. but we'll never go that route. It makes too much sense. It would also eliminate all the poverty, really, in Africa by providing them with everything that they need in the form of very cheap electricity. In any event, though, he did this thing called total energy accounting for the planet.
Yeah.
How much does the sun put out to us? How much is reflected off the moon, that kind of thing.
Right.
And if you apply that today, you find that we have a whole lot more energy coming in than we did in the 70s even. And that energy must cause changes because we're a complex, dynamic system that can't just absorb the energy forever.
But you're talking about, primarily anyway, energy, more energy today coming in from the sun primarily.
Correct.
Than the 1970s?
Correct. 75, we saw the transition from the hydrogen sun to the helium sun, from the yellow to the white. It finally finished its transition, really. And that really was a point of demarcation. Prior to that, 1940 appeared to be when the whole process started. How
come science has not come forward? Because you and I have talked about the changing of the color of the sun before, and nobody, Cliff, is picking up on it.
No, that's not true.
Well,
again, maybe there is a very heavy-handed filter laid over everything.
Okay, maybe that's it, yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of people that tell me that is precisely the case, and that the rise in peer review really comes down to the rise in filtering and censorship. And, I mean, you're very well aware of James McCanney.
Oh, Jim is, yeah, oh, my gosh, yes. Yeah. What then, from a scientific point of view, Cliff, could this mean to planet Earth and every living organism in it if we have changed over from a yellow-hued sun to a brilliant white?
Much more energetic, much more of what we call the actinic or burning rays. So on a mundane level, there's going to be more skin cancer and sun damage for the eyes and so on. The good part of it is probably that none of us will live long enough to develop much of that. Because, again, we're facing that 2012 deadline.
And maybe that's the full changeover from yellow to white, or whatever follows white.
Correct.
Ooh.
Might even go blue.
Ooh.
And, of course, there's all of the, the indigenous population mythos from Australia through Indonesia, through Malaysia, all the way over to the Amerindians, American indigenous peoples that have the Blue Sun event as marking the actual transition.
Ooh. Isn't that interesting?
Curious or incurious?
Yes, isn't that? I have not heard that before. Tell us, if you would, Cliff, tell us a little bit more about the prophecy, but also what could that mean? Well,
the Australian indigenous peoples have this myth about the sun going blue. And it's hard to really, if you get into it, it could be what's known as a plasma discharge, to where all of the planets return their excess plasma, so to speak, to the sun, and it gets really energetic and blue for a moment. But in any event, they talk about the blue event as being the return, if you will, to the dream time, the beginning of the new dream time.
Again, 2012.
Once again, coincidentally, a restart.
Wow.
Now, the Indonesian myths are somewhat similar. They talk about a blue, or a pillar of blue fire that jumps from the earth and goes to the sun and turns the sun blue momentarily. No great negative effects, but it is seen as being, again, a restart, a reset of everything, a cleansing, if you will. And, of course, a lot of the cleansing myths are all full of, being washed away by floods and earthquakes, etc.
Yeah. What do you think could happen? Because it wouldn't be a totally dark blue, because the subtle change between yellow and white is so subtle that the average person has no idea what you're talking about. So could it be more like a blue hue coming out and
a blue aura ring around it that was bluish, something along those lines? Yeah.
But could it also mean, if it's blue or approaching indigo, which is the color of the crown chakra, the ultraviolet or violet, that could also mean, it all kind of ties in, doesn't it?
It kind of does, isn't it? It's very interesting how humans would pass knowledge along. Because you do have all these interrelated elements. in the heavens above, so shall be on earth, that kind of thing.
Right.
Replication of the Orion Belt on the Giza Plateau, and ad nauseum with all of these megalithic structures, etc. And then you have on the Sanskrit and the Taoist side, and in China, you have these sorts of things where you have these, let's just call them coincidences, perhaps meaningful, between, as you say, the colors assigned to the chakras and the various states of the sun, for instance.
Damn.
And then, of course, all the ascension myths.
Jeez, yeah, right. What and how might that be involved in it?
Well, if we get over to I'm not sure about the American Indians and where they get their influence from.
Yeah.
The Mayans